Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. Today, Donovan and I are going to talk about how to be happy with yourself and what that looks like, especially if you're single or even in a relationship. So, Donovan, just starting us off, what are your thoughts about how people can be happy with themselves?
Yeah, so I think this is a pretty deep and wide topic, but maybe we'll frame it a little bit through the lens of relationships. But I think being happy with yourself is basically like finding out how to construct a life for yourself in which you are happy, whether or not there is like a significant other in the picture. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, that gets really tricky because they see their life or their ideal life includes a partner. So for a lot of people, it's like tricky to figure out like, how am I supposed to have this happy life if I don't have a partner? Like that's one of the things that I want. But I think it's critically important to be able to find a happy life or build a happy life without someone else, because what happens is you end up with this over-reliance on some other person, and you can fall into this trap where you think like, oh, once I get someone, once I find this relationship, boom, it's all going to fall into place and everything is going to be nice. But more realistically, what happens is like you just have this other person, and whatever parts of your life weren't working before are continuing to not work. And then maybe that relationship works well, maybe it doesn't, maybe you bring stuff over, maybe they help you carry it or whatever, but it's just way easier to sustain a relationship if you figured out how to be happy with yourself first and how to build a life that's good for you first. And I know personally, like I can really speak to this because there was a time in the past where that's exactly the mindset I was in. I was like, okay, as soon as I find this girlfriend, wherever she is, whatever she looks like, she's out there. Once I get her, then like, boom, it's all going to be set. And like, I did some amount of dating, like some not that serious and some somewhat serious. And what happened, at least in one of these relationships, is I was so overinvested in that relationship and I was so unhappy with everything else. Like I just pinned everything on like, I'm not happy with myself, but this is going to get me through it. Like this person will be the person that helps me get through it. And what happened is it just ended up with this relationship where I was like super needy and clingy and like didn't have any life of my own. And obviously like as on the other side of that, like not especially attractive partner. So like it kind of fizzled out because it was like, I didn't have anything for me. I didn't have any, like I had interest in hobbies, but I didn't really like invest in them too heavily. I always put the relationship above that, like no matter what, to an extreme that doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, of course, if you have a relationship, like sometimes you're going to want to make trade-offs for that. But it was like to the extreme where it was like, oh, you want this one tiny little thing. Like I'm going to give up this thing that's big to me and just like,
wow,
go to this thing that you want. And I guess all of what I'm saying is to say that like, once I was able to build a life for myself and then bring someone else into it, that was a much better relationship. So it's like very important, I think, that you find something sustainable for yourself before you combine forces with someone else. Otherwise, you just have so many risks of it falling apart. That's a lot of jibber jabbering. I need you to say something.
Okay. No, I 100% agree with what you're saying. The gist of it was just like, you really need to be happy with yourself before. It's not that you can't have a relationship if you're not happy with yourself, but just like the risk of it falling apart if you're not happy with yourself before you enter it, or if you're already in it, then it makes it infinitely harder and more challenging. And I had a similar experience where after I realized I didn't even notice it was such a gradual thing when I was in my last long-term relationship of 4 years. I didn't even realize it until after we had broken up that I kind of had lost myself. It just like, I wouldn't say I was needy or clingy, but I just kind of like defaulted to just Netflix and chill at home with him. Just like, it was just easy and convenient. And it's like, the city is like an hour away. I don't want to really drive and just like deal with that. And I didn't really like do the activities that really brought like a lot of joy, whether it was dancing or just, going out with some girlfriends for some wine. Because I also had moved to this more rural area in Southern Maryland. So it's just like, I had some friends, but no one like super close. So it just felt like he was my main source of socialization. And it was just like, it's like, there's not a lot to do in this town. And it's like, to get to the city is an hour. So it was easier. And I'm definitely not blaming him at all. It's just like, it was on me. I could have been more proactive about like pursuing my hobbies and my interests to build the happiness within myself. But whenever we did break up, it just kind of, I felt like, oh, who am I? And I realized, I'm a pretty social being. It's not that I'm probably more on the extroverted side, but I really realized I didn't have like my girlfriends that I was like connecting with, and I had to kind of discover what it was to be happy with myself. And that was just kind of a journey in itself. And I started doing a lot of personal development courses, and eventually I ended up doing this course with where we were broken up into groups, and my group just happened to be all amazing women. So it was just like, it was exactly what I needed at that time, because it was actually on the verge. I started that, like, I remember that first day, of course, it was like a 4-month course, self-expression and leadership program with Landmark. And like that first day, I was still in like this weird state with my partner, where we were kind of like, we decided, we were on different paths. We didn't want the same things, but we were still not like quite broken up officially. Well, we actually broke up in November, but then we kind of got back together in December, because it was like, there was still like a love there, but it was just like, clearly we were on different paths. So it was just like in this weird iffy state that wasn't quite like clear. And I was just like struggling with that. It's like, I love this person, but clearly, this is not going to work out in the long term for what we want out of life. And so I was in that struggle. So it was like January of 2018 where I started this like leadership course and was in this group of girls. I remember I was like having that internal conflict with myself, and I was just pretty quiet. Like the first day of the class, there's like 3 long Saturdays, like from I think 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. essentially, with lots of breaks, and then you go to dinner with your group. And so I was quiet the whole day because I was like dealing with all this mental baggage of my relationship. And I remember just like everyone was going around sharing more about themselves. And I was like just pretty quiet and just like nothing. And then like when it got to me, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to just share with them what it is that I'm dealing with. And I like started crying in front of like these group of women that I just met, like literally that day. And it was such a beautiful thing because we actually connected over it. A couple of them had been through divorces, and it just like brought us together in a very beautiful way. And I just kind of developed this like missing that was in my life. And that like, I was like, wow, I just realized I need, part of what kind of gives me life and excitement is just like being able to connect with others, whether it's girlfriends or guy friends or boyfriends or whatever. Just like having like that socialization brings me a lot of happiness and joy. And, we just became such close girlfriends, and we would end up going out to dinner or an event or karaoke every once in a while. And it was beautiful because I feel like I'm getting a little off tangent, but just to wrap up the story is that like, I just met them like in late January, and like a couple weeks later, it was my birthday. And I realized at that point, I just didn't have a lot of close friends, and I had been in Maryland for a few years at that point. And so I just decided to invite these group of women that I just met like a couple weeks ago to birthday dinner, not expecting anyone to like join, or maybe a couple. And like literally every single one of them like came to my birthday dinner. And it was just such a magical experience in that way. And the other thing that like I pursued that really was something that I love is travel. So I started traveling a lot more. I had been on the East Coast for years thinking, I'm like, oh, I want to be on the East Coast because then I could go to Europe way easier. I can go to the Caribbean way easier. And 3 years, and I never did it. And I was just like, what's holding me back? And so I was like, oh, now it's the chance. I can go to Europe. I went to the Caribbean. I ended up going to a bunch of other countries. I went to Mexico. I went to like a road trip up to up the East Coast. I just did all these traveling things, and it just really, I found this source of happiness of all these things that I love that fulfill me. And then I was also like interviewing a bunch of other doctors, and I was just doing all these things that kind of like bring me life and joy. And I actually got to a point where I felt really happy with myself. And I was dating, but I wasn't really like, you know, I really need this relationship to be happy, because I already established that I was happy. Just like, I actually started loving being single. It was great. It was just like, oh, I could do anything that I want. I could just like go across the country whenever I feel like it. It was fantastic. And so I was in a really good place. And then eventually I ended up meeting my current partner, and I felt like I was in a good place with myself. So when he came into my life, it just only like added more happiness and excitement and love into my life. But I was already clear that I was very happy with my life even before that. So that's a very long-winded story.
Yeah, no, I think it touches on a lot of important things, and probably I'm gonna like corral us towards the ideas of like what you can actually do to be happier with yourself in your life. And you know, going through that story and picking out some of the pieces, it's like you got the space to kind of reevaluate your life and look at the things that brought you happiness and brought you connection, and it wasn't just one specific realm. And I think that's what can get lost sometimes is we're either blocked on one thing or we're over indexing on one thing in terms of, oh man, like life is just like locked by this one thing. But really there's all these different paths, and you know, it's probably at different balances for different people, but like you need a certain variety of experiences and a certain variety of parts of your life going well to have like a holistic good life. And like you were saying, so you weren't traveling, which is one of the things that was important to you.
Yeah.
You didn't feel like you had anyone that you were super close to, which was important to you. And like, as those pieces start falling apart, or like not falling apart, but just like, you know, they fall to the wayside or whatever else, and they're just in a state of disrepair, when enough of them are like switched off or whatever else, then you can find yourself in this position where you're just generally unhappy. And it's like, again, as we were talking about like relationships and stuff, it just doesn't, it's not like a super fulfilling relationship when two people are together out of, like you were saying, convenience, like when you're just there because you're there, and neither person is really tapped into the things that they care about and want to explore and what makes them feel alive. Like, I don't know about you, but for me in my relationships, like I try to look for that overlap where it's like, hey, I have this going on, you have this going on, and then there's some pieces that like fit together in some way that like we can share, but then we're both still doing like these other things that we're interested in, and the balance looks nice, and like it's great. This is all like how things unfold in an ideal world. It doesn't always happen like that.
Right.
But I do think, you know, like this is a pretty broad topic, but I do think that's one of the important things is like, if you're trying to figure out how to be happy with yourself, take out the relationship part and just think about like, okay, what pieces of my life, or like what realms, or how do I have to structure things so that I'm happy? And if you want a relationship, which I think probably most people do, then see how that fits in with everything else, as opposed to constructing your whole world around the relationship. Just because, like I said, in the past I've had not great experiences doing that, and so it's just so much better, and you feel more resilient when you have all those pieces together. Like it's so much easier to just say like, okay, like maybe friends is the thing that's not working right now. Maybe I don't feel like I have that many close relationships, but like if my diet and my other forms of connecting with the world and like and my other relationships are like all in a good place, then it's so much easier to just get that one piece and work on that. And I think like relationships tend to be something we center on, but it works that way for the whole imaginary pie chart that I've been drawing now. But like, you know, the more of those pieces that are filled in, the easier it is, if any one piece is not working, to just go and like hone in on that. And relationships are tricky by their very nature. So it's one of the ones that has benefited the most by having the rest of the pieces filled out.
Yeah. No, I like that pie chart image, because it's like, if your happiness is filled by completely a relationship, if all your expectations of happiness come from a relationship, that's just like meant for disasters. Like if you can't be happy on your own, like you should be sufficient. If like the relationship doesn't pan out or it doesn't work out, yes, it's okay to be sad about it. It's like, you know, losing someone that was important to you. But it's like, if you think life can't go on or my life is ruined, then clearly maybe there wasn't those other pieces in your life to be like, yeah, this really sucks if the relationship ends, but you know, I've got so many other great things in my life. I have family or friends that love me, support me. I have a good exercise routine. I have a lot of interests and hobbies now that I can free up more time for, essentially. And so it's just like there's always an opportunity to really look at what really makes me happy. If the relationship wasn't in the picture, like, and if I looked at my life without that relationship, am I truly happy? Like, not saying you need to break up with that relationship to find out, but just like, can you sufficiently say that I'm happy with myself if I was with or without that person? And that's really the test I think most people need to kind of establish.
Yeah, I think that it makes a lot of sense to think about it that way, just because our relationships, no matter what they are transient in some ways, to say that you never really know exactly what the outcomes are going to be. And like, you can definitely invest super heavily in a relationship, but it can disappear at any time for any reason, because we can't predict or control how other people are going to act. So like, even with family or something else, like your sibling could just randomly be like, I'm mad at you for whatever this thing is, I'm not talking to you anymore. And like, obviously that's not like a great position to be in, and there is something to be said for like working through the relationship and whatnot. But the point I'm trying to get at is that if you over-index too far on any individual relationship, you run the risk of just being hurt for so long. And like, that is part of life. And like, I'm not saying you shouldn't invest in relationships because of that potential, but it's just that there are so many realms, so many people, so many things that you can potentially do. And I think another piece of this puzzle is a lot of times, or at least the people that I've interacted with, if they're not happy with themselves, haven't found other activities that they can do to kind of connect and feel alive and energized. So I don't know how much this applies to anyone that happens to be listening, but that might be one area to look at. Is like, I know when I was not happy with myself, whether or not I was in a relationship, I was spending a lot of time on things that were not fulfilling. Like, I was playing a ton of video games, and I was doing a lot of other stuff that was just kind of a waste of time. And I think there's a place for those types of things. Yeah. But I think it's really hard to be happy with yourself if you haven't developed any sort of like passion or project, or even just an exploratory project, right? It doesn't have to be like, oh, for my whole life, I'm going to work on like tennis. Like, it doesn't have to be that cut and dry, but even just cultivating like curiosity and being like, oh, I'm going to explore this thing and try this thing and do this until you find something like that. Or maybe you never do and you just keep exploring things, which is a totally viable path. Yeah. But I think that kind of getting into these ruts, or at least for me in the past, like getting into these ruts has destroyed my chances at happiness in that time period, because I'm investing so much time in something that's not fulfilling. So all that is to say, I think for some people, it might be a good idea to think about what your passions are, or what your exploration pieces are, or your hobbies, or how you're investing time, because it is hard to be happy with yourself without having some sort of purpose. And that could be multifaceted. It could be broken into a bunch of different projects and goals and tasks and realms and things. But without that sense of purpose, I think it's really hard to be happy with yourself at a deep and like powerful level.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just really important to look at what outside is not just like things to do. Like, yeah, I could binge a lot of TV or play video games, but actually what brings, really like tap into what brings you joy and happiness and fulfillment. I think that's a different piece to explore. And I think for me, coming out of that breakup, which I felt like I was able to get over in like 2 months, which I don't know, people might judge me for that because it was a 4-year relationship, but that for me is actually a short amount of time compared to like remember breaking up with my college boyfriend, and I was like a mess for months, like for a long time, because I wasn't pursuing the things that would bring me joy. And what I was doing, even though it was kind of not for the purpose of getting over my relationship, but what I was doing was just like doing like this nonprofit project of interviewing doctors for my sense of fulfillment. It kind of allowed me to get out of my own head and like stop focusing so much on myself and my misery, really focus on like being a contribution to others, and being curious and engaged and interacting with strangers and learning people's stories. It was actually really exciting and fulfilling. And so it's just a combination of several different things that kind of helped me get out of it relatively quickly. And I think the other thing that I wanted to address was that I thought of the scenario where maybe like someone like loses their spouse because of death or something to that extent, not to be morbid, but like I think some people have this idea like, oh well, I have to mourn indefinitely because if I am happy, then it minimizes the relationship that I had, which I kind of like don't agree. It's like, yes, of course, grieve when you need to grieve. There's no right or wrong amount of time to grieve. It's like you do it in your own time. But if you're just like checked out of life, you're like, I cannot pursue any passions because it's just like would dishonor him or her. And that's just like, I don't know. It's like was that what your partner would want for you, just to be checked out of life indefinitely? Or would he or she want you to like actually get on and find like joy in life again? So it's just like a matter of reframing it, I guess, in that way of just like, yes, there's always, after a breakup or death or whatever, there's totally room to grieve and do it in your own time. But if you feel like you're stuck in that for years and years and years and you're not getting out of it and you're not doing any new actions like that would be fulfilling for you, then that's just something to kind of like look at for yourself.
Yeah, and this is probably not like a good test to do on yourself all the time, but I know like in my life, it's a good test for me, like being in a relationship and getting out of it, how deep down the spiral I go compared to how balanced my life is, right? Like, so when my life has been balanced and a relationship doesn't work out, then it still hurts, still sucks, still takes time. There's still like this process. But kind of like you were saying, like when I was at a bad point and I had just completely put all my hopes on this one relationship working out, when it didn't work out, I just like spiraled down for probably a year and was just miserable and like, oh, there's no point to anything and I can't do anything. And like, my life was so out of balance. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is that like, if you can see when other people are in relationships that end, you can see the difference between someone who just like spirals straight down and stays there for a very, very long time. And generally, like, at least in my experience, I've seen that most of the people who are able to bounce back quickly, it's because they have other things going on. They have other things that they can tap into. They have other parts of their life that they're connected with, that they know the pathways for, that they can start investing more time in those areas. And again, it's not to minimize like that there's the pain, right? Like there's still pain, there's still a process, there's still hurt, but the ability to bounce back. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about, where it's like this 2-month period. Like, I don't think there's any set period. It's just when you feel okay and stable enough and ready to go back to it. And like, if the period is short, I mean, there are some circumstances where like some weird stuff is going on, but in general, if the period is short, like, to me, that signals like more balance. And there can be situations where like the relationship has gotten to like a horrible place and breaking it off is just like, wow, great, refreshing. Like I'm ready to go back into it with something new. But like in general, I just think that it says like, I'm in a better place. I have these other things to explore. Just exactly like what you said with your story. Like I have these other places to put my energy. I have other ways to like take my time, other paths that make me happy. And I guess it's just important, like if someone is considering how they can be happy with themselves, to make sure that that's really what they're looking at, as opposed to thinking about like, how can I be happy with myself once I get this relationship, once I get this thing, once I get this other thing, once I get this other thing, and look more at the process. Because I kind of look at it as like, again, it goes back to this like imaginary pie chart thing, which is like, you can't check off a certain piece and then have it just work indefinitely. It's about like just constantly like reconfiguring this thing and like putting the pieces back in and sharpening them as life changes. And I think that's a big part of being happier with yourself, is seeing them as a process and seeing all the pieces that go into the process, as opposed to, I have in the past, and I have run into people in the past that think there is some magic thing that once I get checked off, it could be a relationship, it could be something else. But once I check this off, my life will be perfect and it'll be ready to go. And it's just not how it works. Like, that's not how I've seen things unfold.
No. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Great. Well, I think that kind of covers our topic pretty thoroughly, unless you have any final thoughts.
I think that's pretty much it. It's just, the core message is to be happy with yourself. You need to either explore or pursue what makes you feel connected, and bringing someone else into that may add to the overall pie, and that may add something. But in general, I have not seen it be effective for that to be the only piece of your pie chart and the only thing that you're honed in on. Relationships tend to be more fruitful and have better longevity when both people can be independently happy and use each other as a source of additional happiness, as opposed to the one thing in their life.
Right. Yeah. No, I concur. And I kind of, just to add to it, it just like, I feel like the removing of the expectations that your partner is the source of your happiness is really key and critical. Just like, you can't expect your partner to be the source of your happiness. Then you're just kind of setting your partner up to fail in a way. Because it's like, they're going to do something that annoys you at some point, probably. And it's just like, that doesn't mean it's like their fault why you're unhappy. I mean, there's situational things, but just like at the core of things, if you're not happy with yourself, then you can't expect that partner to fulfill that need for you. You have to fulfill it within yourself, first and foremost.
Yeah. And the one last thing that I'll add is it also creates a drag on the relationship.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you recall any dating. I had some dating where like I met people who were in a very bad place and did not enjoy their life. And like, sure, it didn't develop into a full-blown relationship, because why would it? But like, you can feel the drag of just like, I hate everything about what I'm doing. And it's like, okay, I don't know if I want to be a part of that. Like, I don't know if that's something that's going to energize me. And like, I don't know that that's something I want to be a part of. And like, there's the piece of like, oh wow, I wish like I could help this person and know what to do and whatever else. But yeah, it just isn't like, in the same way that it's not super fun to be around someone who's just a dick all the time and like super sarcastic and rude constantly. It's the same type of thing, like someone who just doesn't enjoy anything. It just kind of sucks life out of the relationship.
Right. Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you next time.